In the world of sailing, experience is your greatest asset. It's what keeps you alive when the sea turns against you. Back in 1982, Deborah Scaling Kiley, who was just 23 years old, was already a seasoned veteran of the waves. She wasn't just any sailor. She had made history as the first American woman to complete the grueling Whitbread round-the-world race, which is, a true test of skill and endurance. This accomplishment gave her a level of confidence and know-how that, honestly, few could match. Her deep understanding of the ocean's unpredictable nature would soon be tested in a way she could never have imagined, pushing her far beyond the limits of any race she had ever sailed. This particular voyage was meant to be a straightforward delivery, not a life-or-death struggle. The job was simple on paper. Deliver the 18-meter yacht named the Trashman from the chilly waters of Maine down to the warmth of Florida. It was a routine trip many sailors make, a 2,000-kilometer journey down the American East Coast. For this delivery, Kiley joined a small crew. The team consisted of the captain, John Lippeth, and his girlfriend, Meg Mooney. Also aboard were two other sailors, the experienced Brad Kavanagh and Mark Adams. Together they were a 5-person team tasked with bringing the vessel safely to its destination. The trip was supposed to be a standard professional assignment, a chance to earn some money while doing what they loved. Unfortunately, not all was as it should have been. The yacht itself was reportedly not in the best condition, and more alarmingly, the captain's behavior was a cause for concern. Kiley later noted that John Lippeth had been drinking heavily from the outset of the journey. In any high-stakes environment, whether you're climbing a mountain or sailing an ocean, a clear-headed leader is non-negotiable. A captain, under the influence, compromises the safety of everyone on board. This breakdown in leadership cast a dark shadow over the voyage before the first storm cloud even appeared on the horizon, creating an undercurrent of tension among the crew as they set out to sea. The initial leg of the journey proceeded without major incident, lulling the crew into a false sense of security as they navigated the coastal waters. They were making good time, and the rhythm of life at sea took over. Watches were set, meals were shared, and the endless blue stretched out before them. However, for Kiley, a professional who understood the importance of discipline, the captain's ongoing drinking was a persistent worry. It was a glaring red flag in an environment where one small mistake can have catastrophic consequences. The crew dynamics were strained, a silent problem lurking just beneath the surface, waiting for a catalyst to expose the fatal flaws in their expedition. 2 days into their trip, as the Trashman sailed off the coast of North Carolina, the weather took a dramatic and terrifying turn. The sky darkened and the sea, once calm, began to churn with a terrifying violence. They had sailed directly into the path of a ferocious tropical storm. This was no ordinary squall. It was a monster that unleashed winds howling at over 110 kilometers per hour. Towering waves, some reaching heights of 10 meters, crashed over the yacht, tossing it about like a toy. Each wave that slammed into the hull was a brutal, deafening blow, threatening to tear the vessel apart piece by piece. The situation deteriorated with alarming speed. Compounding the crisis, the one person who should have been in command was incapacitated. As the storm raged, Captain John Lippeth was reportedly intoxicated and asleep at the helm, leaving the crew leaderless at the most critical moment. Without decisive action from their captain, the crew scrambled to save the yacht. The sheer force of the storm was overwhelming. The sails were shredded, the mast snapped, and the boat began taking on massive amounts of water. The relentless waves breached the deck, flooding the compartments below. The sounds of splintering wood and groaning metal filled the air as the Trashman began its final, fatal descent into the churning abyss. With the yacht sinking rapidly beneath their feet, the crew knew they had only moments to act. The terrifying order to abandon ship was given. Their only hope for survival was a small, 11-foot inflatable dinghy, a flimsy raft that seemed wholly inadequate to face the monstrous sea. In the chaos of the capsize, Meg Mooney suffered a severe gash to her leg, an injury that would have devastating consequences. The 5 sailors scrambled from the deck of the sinking Trashman onto the tiny rubber boat, watching in horror as the vessel they had called home was swallowed by the waves, leaving them utterly alone and at the mercy of the ocean. Their ordeal had only just begun. As if the storm and the sinking weren't enough, a new and more primal terror emerged from the depths. The blood from Meg's wound trailing in the water acted as a beacon. Within moments, the dark, menacing shapes of sharks began to circle their fragile raft. Kiley estimated there were as many as 20 of them, their fins slicing through the turbulent water. The predators were drawn by the scent of blood, and they immediately began ramming the dinghy, testing its durability. Adrift in a raging storm with no food, no water, and no means of navigation, the crew of the Trashman was now surrounded by nature's most efficient killers. The first days adrift were a descent into a living nightmare. Huddled together in the cramped dinghy, the survivors were exposed to the relentless sun during the day and the chilling cold at night. Thirst quickly became an all-consuming torment. With no fresh water supply, the temptation to drink the seawater that surrounded them was immense. However, Kiley and Kavanagh knew that drinking salt water was a death sentence. It accelerates dehydration, causing kidney failure and delirium. The sharks remained a constant, terrifying presence, their fins a perpetual reminder of the predators waiting just below the surface. Meg Mooney's leg wound, untreated and washed constantly with salty, bacteria-filled water, was showing severe signs of infection. On the third day, the psychological toll of their situation began to claim its first victims. Delirious from dehydration and having succumbed to the fatal temptation of drinking seawater, Captain John Lippeth began to hallucinate. He believed he saw land just over the horizon and was convinced he could swim to it. Despite the desperate pleas of the others, he slipped over the side of the dinghy and into the infested water. The crew could only watch in absolute horror as the sharks immediately converged on him. The attack was swift and brutal. His screams were cut short as he was pulled under, vanishing into a flurry of thrashing water, a grim testament to the fatal consequences of his delusion. The horror was compounded just hours later. Mark Adams, who had also been drinking seawater, succumbed to a similar madness. He started talking incoherently about needing to go to the store to buy cigarettes for everyone. In his delirious state, he seemed utterly disconnected from their grim reality. Before Kiley or Kavanagh could stop him, he too went over the side. The sharks, still frenzied from the first attack, descended upon him instantly. Kiley would later describe the sight of the violent, bloody attack as the single most horrifying moment of her life. The water churned red as a second member of their crew was consumed before their eyes, leaving only 3 survivors on the raft. The final tragedy among the initial crew came as Meg Mooney's condition worsened. The gash on her leg had developed into a severe case of blood poisoning, and she grew weaker by the hour, eventually succumbing to the infection. Faced with the agonizing reality of her death, Kiley and Brad Kavanagh knew they could not keep her body in the small dinghy. With heavy hearts, they said a prayer for their friend. In a final act of respect, they removed her jewelry to return to her family if they were ever rescued. Then, they gently pushed her body into the sea, where it was immediately taken by the ever-present sharks, a final somber sacrifice to the ocean. Now, only 2 remained, Deborah Scaling Kiley and Brad Kavanagh. They were utterly exhausted, dehydrated, and emotionally shattered, but they clung to life with a primal determination. For 5 agonizing days, they had drifted aimlessly, watching 3 of their companions perish in the most horrific ways imaginable. They battled the elements, the constant threat of sharks, and the overwhelming despair that threatened to consume them. They had drifted nearly 150 kilometers off their original course, far from any standard shipping lanes. All hope seemed lost. Then, on the 5th day, a miracle appeared on the horizon, the distinct silhouette of a large vessel slowly making its way toward them. It was a Russian cargo ship. The crew spotted the tiny dinghy and its 2 emaciated occupants and altered their course to investigate. For Kiley and Kavanagh, the sight was almost unbelievable, a hallucination like the ones that had claimed their friends, but this was real. They were pulled from the water, weak and barely conscious, but alive. Their rescue, 140 kilometers south of Cape Lookout, marked the end of their torturous ordeal at sea. They had survived against impossible odds, a testament to their resilience and Kiley's refusal to surrender to the fatal allure of seawater, a decision that undoubtedly saved both their lives. In the aftermath, the trauma of the event left indelible scars on both survivors. Brad Kavanaugh eventually returned to his career as a professional yachtsman, but he admitted that the experience had changed him forever. For Kiley, the path forward was different. She found it too painful to maintain contact with Kavanaugh, as the shared memory was too raw. Instead of returning to the sea, she transformed her harrowing story into a source of strength for others. She became a motivational speaker and an author, sharing the lessons she had learned about resilience and the sheer will to live. Her story was not just one of survival, but of finding a new purpose in its wake. Kiley documented her experience in her powerful 1994 book, Albatross, the True Story of a Woman's Survival at Sea, and later wrote No Victims, Only Survivors, which offered lessons gleaned from her ordeal. She dedicated her life to helping others overcome their own challenges, proving that even from the darkest depths of tragedy, one can emerge with a powerful message of hope. Though she passed away in 2012 at the age of 54, her story continues to be told, featured in documentaries and books. Deborah Scaling. Kiley's legacy is a stark and inspiring reminder of the fragility of life and the incredible strength of the human spirit when pushed to its absolute limit.